briefly introduced me, but let me introduce myself again. I'm Changbun. I'm a senior solutions engineer or sales engineer based out of Snowflake, Singapore. I've been with Snowflake for about 2 years and 3 months now. I cover the ASEAN region, so I think most of you or some of you, if you have been in contact with me, we have been chatting, right? I wish I can say hi in the chat, but I think we have disabled the chat. But yep, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out to me through your account team, if there's anything of interest that you want to follow up on. But without further ado, let me just set the stage for the demo. I promise less slides, more demo, okay? Now, I introduced myself as a solutions engineer or sales engineer with Snowflake, right? But actually, with the rest of my sales engineering team, we are actually moonlighting as a ski gear company. Right? At night, we sell things on e-commerce, right? We sell ski gear, right? Snow gear, ski gear, your jackets, winter jacket, winter pants, helmets, goggles, right? For skiing. And I need to juggle 2 jobs, right? I don't have a lot of time, in my day, I meet customers, I help you all solve your data problem. But at the night, what I want to do is really to help grow, my e-commerce sales. I don't have a lot of time. So I would like to use, the Gen AI capability within Snowflake to really make sense of the data that we are collecting. So the challenge that we are facing right now is, we're trying to understand more about what the customer is actually saying. When they call a call center, what are they saying? And are they happy? What's their issue? We're trying to understand more whether, customer lifetime value, customer satisfaction, to understand whether they will come back to us to make a subsequent purchase. This is not a unusual problem, right? You typically have a lot of data that sits untapped within your data system or data environment. How can you now leverage Snowflake to help you make sense of all this data in a much simpler way? Now, Yang also mentioned these 3 key pillars earlier: the simplifying of data foundation, accelerating AI, as well as scaling with application. And today, what I'm going to show is really around how we can bring to life these 3 pillars with Snowflake capability. Now, for the simplifying of data transformation, I'm going to have near real-time data coming in, but I don't want to manage the complicated pipeline. And that's where I can use a capability called dynamic tables. And I will show that in the demo. Now, in terms of using AI to accelerate the decision-making and analysis, how can I leverage Cortex AI to quickly analyze data and derive sentiment analysis? Finally, Yang also mentioned about how application can be built easily to visualize your insights. I'm going to use Streamlit and Snowflake to show you how simple it is to stand up a Streamlit application and to present visualization, interactive visualization within Snowflake itself. Now, I see that there's some question in the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. If I have time, I will address them live during or after the demo. If not, my colleague will answer them on via chat. Right, so let me go to the demo itself. So I have logged in to my environment. Your environment might look slightly different from mine, but rest assured, changes that you see or what you see in my screen will come to you very, very soon. So what I'm showing on screen now is the notebook experience, right? I would typically, I would say raise your hand, right? Raise your virtual hand if you are a fan of notebooks. You work typically in a notebook-like environment, in an IDE, where you can write Python code and see it interactively. Now, Snowflake is bringing that experience to you. It has been announced. Stay tuned for when it will actually be available to all accounts, coming very, very soon. So what I did was I actually started the compute resource, right? And basically now, I can run code. The key thing to note about this notebook experience is really around how you're able to have Python's code, SQL code, as well as Markdown, right? All within a single editor or an interface itself, right? If you're using Jupyter, you are used to that kind of interface. A lot of the keyboard shortcuts are very similar. You can move up, move down, add cell above, add cell below, run individual cell, run top to bottom, and eventually schedule a notebook to run at a specific time, right? That's all coming to you. So what I did here was basically very simple. I imported the Streamlit application, instead, and I made a connection to the Streamlit, or rather to Snowflake itself. You don't have to key in any parameters, username, password, right? All you have to do, because this is all within Snowflake, is just to say, get the active session. And then it will run with your user, with your roles permission. Simple as that. Now, for this example, what we are dealing with is actually transcript data, call center data. Right? So I can easily do a quick analysis of where all these customers are calling from. My business is international, right? My sales engineers, my customer, my colleagues are all around the world. So we have, transaction and customer calling from all around the world. And I can easily create bar charts to visualize the output. Right? It's a very interactive, it documents down your thought process of as you explore the notebook itself. And I think on the right side, you can see I can actually name certain section or cell so that I can refer to them. Right. So I have run a simple group by, right, to explore, where some of these core transcript are coming from. Very simple Python data frame operation to do the group by and aggregation and analysis before I finally visualize the data. So now if I just want to take a look at some of the English transcript, right, I can just do a simple filter in SQL. Right? So again, I mentioned earlier about how you can have a mixture of Python and SQL within the same notebook. Immediately, I'm able to see the SQL, or rather the output from the SQL query itself. I can see that, hey, actually, my transcript is all here. And you realize that a transcript is a conversation. Right? You have a customer saying something, an agent replying, a customer follow up with something. Now, typically what happens is that you would like to get sense or make sense out of all this unstructured text data. And typically what you would do is you embark on the NLP project, you import a lot of Python library, right? You try to do sentiment, you do stop work, removal, you do TF, IDF, things like that. Now within Snowflake, the core capabilities that Yang mentioned earlier about how we have serverless Cortex function. And this is one of the serverless Cortex function that we are doing right now using sentiment analysis, right? That's really the power of being able to do sentiment analysis or even other LLM functions with just a single SQL function call. And that's what I'm doing now. You see, I'm passing in the transcript to this sentiment function, and the output will be stored in this sentiment score column. And I'm showing the transcript next to it. So very simple, again, -1, if you're familiar with the sentiment score, -1 is a very negative sentiment. +1 is a very positive sentiment. 0 is a neutral tone. Right? All of this can be available. And now you can bring this insights or this score to help you prioritize, right, internally when you're reviewing some of these, like next action to take, which are the customer that you need to focus on more, or to prioritize your action because you don't have all the time in the world, and that's where all of this is beneficial, right? So you can focus on the most negative call, and then try to go from there to see and study what is the issues, what are the issues that's the most negative, that's giving most customer dissatisfaction, because when they call the call center, your call center agent is supposed to resolve the issue for the customer, right? But if it's a very negative sort, it probably means that the customer is not very happy with the reply. So what can be improved from it? So other than the sentiment function, right? We actually have other serverless function within the Cortex LLM capability, things like translation and text summarization. Right, so the benefit of this now is that you don't need to call an external API and build pipelines to try to integrate where your data sits, and then you have a Python application pulling data from a warehouse, from your data systems, and it's sending it out to an external API. And then to finally get the translation, and then you store it back in your Python application and you write it back to a table. Like all of this is just instantly available, as easy to use as calling a SQL function. Right. Now, if I go now next to this other capability that I mentioned earlier, now how do I bring all this calling of this Cortex SQL function capability into my pipeline and actually store this data into a table? And that's where this capability that we call dynamic table come into play. Now, if I take a look now, and typically that's what is happening in real world environment, right? You have your data coming in, streaming data coming in, but you don't want really to manage some of this pipeline. You just want to create it, and then you assume, or rather you hope that this pipeline will continue to run efficiently, effectively without um, issues. And that's what we are doing, like this is my core itself, the core, and then we have a sentiment. And what we are trying to do now is really to join this streaming data that you see coming in right here with this sentiment score with the customer lifetime values static table. So of course, what I can do is I can write a query. Right? I can write a query that says, join this, and I do my orchestration of this table being materialized as a create table, has select statement, or I go and do an insert into another existing table. I can do all of this orchestration using any tools of choice. But Snowflake make it really easy to manage all of this using what we call the dynamic table. And that's what is happening. So I basically put the same query has the select statement here. And what I'm basically saying here has the lag is saying, if my data is coming in and I would like to have the ability to, have this table materialize, refresh incrementally without me managing anything with it. And this is the actual SLA, right? What I'm saying is, if I have streaming data comes in, within 1 minute, I want the latest data to be available as part of the customer latest call summary. This is my guarantee to the business. Of course, this lag is up to you to define. You can say it's 1 minute, 30 minutes, an hour, 6 hours, half a day, up to you. But the key thing to note is really so simple. And now when I query this customer latest call summary, I will always have the latest data with the customer ID, call sentiment ID, the CLV, customer lifetime value, as a single table. Very, very simple to use. And of course, now if I really want to start to look at how the jobs has been running, the dynamic table, how it has been refreshed, all I have to do is really come here to the dynamic table, click at this, look at the graph. I'll be able to see what are the dependency upstream. Give me a moment. Yep, it's loading. Let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see. I can see that it's joining these two tables with a target lag of 1 minute as the output. And I can see that the last refresh was successful. There's 11,000 row, whether the refresh mode is incremental or refresh, right? And I can see each individual refresh history as well, right? Because, I can see that, this is the refresh that actually has the new data and actually did the transformation, but subsequent refresh, they are no change because I have no new streaming data coming in, right? So simple to really use. Now that's the simplifying data. I show the accelerate as well. The next is what I'm going to show is around how you can build some of this application easily within Snowflake. What I'm showing you right here is what we call Streamlit within Snowflake. Streamlit is an open source Python library. If you're working in Python, chances are you already come across this application. But what we are doing is really making this really simple to be able to have this application within Snowflake itself. And what I'm showing here is, really building an interface so that I can bring in my own sentiment directly and calling the Cortex sentiment function that I showed earlier. And really it's around, now I'm paste the entire call log. I can say, okay, let's run this. Immediately at the bottom, I get the sentiment score of the call itself. Right? A quick and easy way to build an interactive application for your end users to really consume insights or models that you have already built. Earlier, I showcased the dynamic table. If now I want to show, what's ammo? Let me just go back and start this again. That was not intentional, and you can see this is not a recording. It's happening live. And let me see. Yes, okay, now it's fine. That's an unanticipated part. That scares me. Okay. Wow, wonderful. Okay, so earlier, when we run a query to show the results from the dynamic table output, we see it has part of the bottom in the worksheet itself. But right here, you see immediately, I can visualize a table If you're using a data table kind of a data editor from the latest streaming version, you can build an input directly back into the data itself. You can create additional columns with buttons to trigger actions that fire off email, integrates with your Slack webhook, call another external API, call another system to trigger some actions. All of that is all possible, right? Because this is Python. I can create again visualization, that is interactive. I can have sliders, I can have mouse over effect that explain more about the aggregate the charts or the data. I can do slice and dice as necessary. One thing that I did not talk about and really is around the ability to still have traditional ML function. Yesterday there was a virtual hands-on lab that covers some of this capability around forecasting, classification. And what we are doing here is really, to do forecasting of call volumes. Right? You want to plan ahead to see how many staff you need to have on hand in the call center to help address the call volume. So I can build a, productionize or present some of these insights to business user using this Streamlit application. I can change the period where I'm looking ahead, forecast period. And what you see here will be the output itself. The dark blue line represents the forecasted value. The light blue is the historic value. And you get the upper bound and lower bound. Right? So you get some confidence interval to see, okay, if I want to be a bit more, Singaporean, we say a bit more kiasu, I want to be a bit more conservative, I can have something around here to buffer for a bit of, uncertainty. So this is actually very simple. When I'm calling this, it's really around the ability to call this SQL function in one line, right? Calling this model that's trained and calling the forecast and passing in the number of periods, right? This input has a variable, right, into this SQL function. So with one line, I call this function, I'm able to visualize all of this as well. Okay. And that's it from demo. Let me go back to the slide to quickly recap what we shown today. Really around building the data strategy and data foundation first, right? I know we all love to have an AI strategy. We all love to show fancy stuff, but you realize garbage in, garbage out. You need proper data. You need proper data governance. And Snowflake can really help you around that with the simplifying of data foundation. Accelerate AI is very simple. Calling SQL functions without you having to manage infrastructure, manage external API call, all of with single call of a SQL function, you're able to do all of this easily. And finally, ability to scale with application. Right, Streamlit is just one of the interface. You can have your React framework or other user interface all hosted within Snowflake Container Service, and you can do all of these applications as well. Now, if you're interested, and I mentioned the virtual hands-on lab from yesterday, if you're interested to find out more, you would like to join more of this virtual hands-on lab session, find out more about this use case, join our webinar, right? Scan this QR code or just do a quick search on Google and say Snowflake virtual hands-on lab, right? It will bring you to the page with the full agenda and schedule of all the virtual hands-on lab that's available. Right, and that's all that I have. Right, over to you, Faye.
Thank you so much, Yang and Changboon. There is truly